There are several accounts of the baptism, right? And it's kind of fitting that I just read the wrong one, just so you know. Because I'm halfway through it, I'm like, oh, I don't think this, that piece, which is so powerful. And so we'll take it as divine intervention, not a mistake of Father Geoff's. But that dialogue between John and Jesus when he's like, no way, man. I'm not, I know who you are. This isn't right. And actually, it was supposed to have been Mark's gospel. So that's your homework. Go home and read the correct gospel. But part of it is why they're sitting side by side, why I went to that one. I don't know. Except to say, as I said, that's so important. As it connects to the first reading. And as it connects to where we are right now as people. Whether that's this community or our country, our world, it doesn't matter. I don't often put something in my hand when I'm preaching, but it's just, this servant is going to bring justice to the nations. But what that means or what that looks like is up for debate. Except it's not. Right? It's going to bring justice to the nations, but not damage anyone or anything that is weak. A bruised reed, he's not going to crush. The smoldering wick, these things will be protected. This servant will bring justice. Not crying out, not shouting, not making his voice heard in the street. Sound familiar? I've said this my whole life. Most of you know, I was in politics before I was a priest. And I often joke, I don't see a lot of difference. When I was leaving, I was working for a member of Congress when I was leaving to join the Oblate. Oh, you're leaving politics? Oh, you don't know the Catholic Church very well. Right? Because politics is a part of who we are. And I'm not going to preach about politics except to say I want to preach about humans, and we're political. And the thing that struck me in my whole political life and in my religious life is that most people are not converted by screaming. You're a terrible human being, and until you change, I'm sorry. I mean, I love you. Love the sinner, hate the sin. All these weird ways in which these things get communicated. And yet the message is really clear. And I know the counter of it. Believe me. It's been my whole life in one form or another to think about that. Like, what has converted me? Why did I leave politics to become a priest? Well, it's because some guy I ran into at a McDonald's told me I was a horrible heretic and I needed to get saved before I burned for all eternity. Maybe that works for some. I have a dear friend that I do ministry with. He's a musician, and we had a whole ministry we did together. And he said he knew people who were converted that way. I said, that's awesome on some level. It would never convert me. And I just have not met a lot of people anywhere around the world for whom that's the conversion. But I think that's really important to think about, because the victory that's being communicated by Isaiah in terms of this servant and how Jesus lived, that victory is over hearts and attitudes. Not rolling people over. Jesus didn't do it. There's just no support in the life of Jesus for that attitude or that behavior. Just roll people over. No, a bruised reed he will not crush. A smoldering wick he will not put out. And that's how he lived. For goodness sakes, he let us kill him. You turn me down, I'm going to be really loud because this just drives me crazy. I don't get it. It's really clear, particularly in our church. He opens his arms in full exposure. And that's not easy, I get it. There's much that frustrates me in our church and in our world. If people could just listen to me, or you probably got a good idea too. But it's the victories over hearts and attitudes. And like I said, my heart's never been converted by yelling and screaming. I guess maybe there are some. My dear friends, there are. Okay, cool. God can work any way God wants. But in my conversion of heart, why I'm concerned about justice, why I'm concerned about whatever, our planet, has to do with how I've been challenged, generally out of love. Because, see, there's a big difference between speaking effectively and changing someone's life. I brought a show and tell. Years ago, I was working with Catholic Art Work Camp, Service Work Camp. They do week-long programs. And for a number of years, they did these care cards. Everyone at the camp, it could be upwards of 500 people, had this envelope, and you could write them a note, hey, thank you for whatever. And I got this one, and I just ran across it cleaning my room when I was in isolation. I think my life is changing, and I think it's partly your fault. Thanks for the awesome homilies this week. I love that. I think my life's changing, and part of it's your fault. I say a lot of things as a preacher, and I don't know where they hit or where they don't. We're really good as humans. Father Ron Rolheiser makes this point. We're really good as humans at identifying the problem. We're not so good about changing the situation because it involves hearts and minds and attitudes. And brothers and sisters, if that's the victory and that's what Isaiah said and that's how Jesus lived, then it will take a long time, and we do not like that, do we? It's hard to sit with things that are unresolved. We want it done on our clock. Something profound happened about 6 hours ago on the border of Israel and Jordan. A mass was celebrated at the chapel of the baptism of Jesus, the chapel that commemorates where that took place. For the first time since before I was born, 1967 is the last time a mass was celebrated at the chapel that commemorates what we celebrate today. And it was celebrated again today. There are people who have lived there who never saw it. You say, big deal. Yeah, it's just a symptom of a bigger problem, isn't it? It was landmines largely that kept people away. And all the yelling and screaming and calling of names didn't change anything. Took years for that to return. And we go through spaces of darkness in our lives, either as individuals, as communities, and right now as an entire world. As we started this Mass, I don't know about you, I'm very sun sensitive, and I couldn't help but go, right? The light is here. The days are getting longer. And so then the question becomes, it's not just about us pointing out to people what the right road is. We got to be on that road. We have to be living in such a way that testifies to it. Pope Paul VI said so powerfully, modern people don't listen so much to teachers, more witnesses. And to the extent they listen to teachers, it's because those people are first witnesses. But that's hard, it is. I get it. I would just challenge each and every one of us to think about who's challenging us. Who are the prophetic servant voices in our lives? Who's telling us what maybe we need to hear but don't want to hear? That isn't comforting. I would say, right, the classic definition of a prophet, they comfort the disturbed and they disturb the comfortable. And at times we need both. We need someone to comfort us in a space of loneliness, in a space of pain. And then we also need to be disturbed, to say, yeah, I need to think about that again. It's a great thing to recall often, maybe particularly right after we've received the Eucharist. Lord, come into my heart, change my attitude, take victory over me. Let me know where I need to be challenged. Right? That's never fun. We do it in other ways. We do it as students when our homework or tests are corrected. We do it as athletes when our coaches show us game film and point out all our flaws and mistakes. We have to be able to do it in our faith, to sit in the silence of our heart and let our Lord convict us of what needs to change, and then to listen to the prophetic voices around us that are challenging us, and to be discerning about it. But as Isaiah said, it isn't just about yelling and screaming in the street. There just isn't a lot of support for that. What there is support for is the quiet, whispering voice of the Lord that is profoundly strong in its ability to conquer sin and death, to conquer the human heart, in the best sense of that word, to conquer, so that we become a more perfect instrument of love and mercy, generosity, justice, awareness of everyone around us. It is hard. It's why we kill prophets pretty often, right? You look through history, we kill them because the challenge gets to be too much, and that's enough. And of course, the ultimate example, God takes flesh, shows us how to live, and in our fear and in our frustration, we as humanity said, that's enough, and put him to death. So here we are today, in the midst of a very difficult time, any way you look at it, or anywhere you sit on it, to say, who is the servant that Isaiah was singing about? Who is the one that's bringing justice, understanding it's a long road, because you got to change hearts and attitudes, and that's difficult. And then, where am I on that journey? Am I one that just points out the road where others need to go? Am I on that road? Am I the witness or the teacher, as Paul VI said? And as we contemplate all those questions and take a little moment in the silence of our hearts before we receive him in the Eucharist to say, Lord, challenge me. Show me my game film. Correct my test. Whatever analogy you want. Because we know ultimately we will pass that test. We will have the victory because he's already won it. Lord, help me see the bruised reeds in my life, those smoldering wicks that need to be relit. Because that is who we are. That is whose we are, his. He's the servant, he's the suffering servant, and we are his followers. So let us get on that road and follow him, because it will lead us to glory, not just in heaven, but glory on earth. It is hard work. Don't hear me wrong. This is not a Pollyanna homily. But the alternative just leads us to more and more disintegration, more breakdown. And the person of Christ is bringing it all together. Let us ponder that for a minute. Like I said, it's painful and it's hard. But anything less will never take us where we know we have to be, where we need to go. It laid gently at our feet, an invitation. And you and I can just walk away and do whatever we want with it. But it'll always be right there for us to pick up. An invitation for us and for all those around us. May God be praised.